I pulled up his feedback and it said 0%. And his comment was, I should have listened. I should have listened. I should not have flown. I barely made it home. And I was like, oh man, that just like hit me. And I was just like, wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of air safety and your own personal safety, we ask that you keep a close watch on your carry-on and personal items.
Welcome to the AeroExploration podcast, where aviation's past, present, and future meet. We explore the stories that build aviation history, take you inside the industry today, and uncover the career paths and innovations keeping the industry in motion. We go behind the scenes, into the cockpit, and onto the ramp, meeting the people and discovering the places that define aviation. If it's part of the flying world, you'll find it here. This is AeroExploration.
Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the AeroExploration podcast. My name is Jim and I'm your host. I'm a CFI and aviation enthusiast, and I'm so glad you're able to join me for this episode. So those of you who are regulars to the podcast know that it has been a while since I put out any content, and it's been over 2 months since I put anything on this podcast. Been a long time since I put out any video content and the Flying Midwest podcast as well. That changes today. I'm back into production of not just this, but also the YouTube content. I've got a ton of interviews lined up over the next few weeks to get the podcast back up and running. I had some things pop up in my personal and professional lives that just had to be the priority, and that unfortunately took me out of the content creation space for a little bit. But I'm back. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to have you on this episode, and we're going to talk about some really cool things. With that said, I'm not going to waste any time getting into this interview because it's a really cool topic to me. So on this episode, I'm happy to be joined by Mark Wolfgang. He is the creator of PlaneWX, which is a weather briefing type service that you can subscribe to. It sends you emails. You can plan trips out well in advance, and it will give you a score based on your personal limits to help you make aeronautical decisions, mitigate risk, things like that. So I think without further ado, we're going to let Mark tell his story, tell you all about what PlaneWX is, how he came up with it, and all kinds of aircraft that he's been able to fly as part of his aviation journey. So without further ado, let's welcome Mark to the podcast. Well, Mark Wolfgang, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here. Happy to talk about PlaneWX.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and tell my story and my journey and talk a little bit about PlaneWX.
Awesome. So let's just dive right into it. Can you tell me how you first got interested in aviation? Was it like a lifelong thing, or did you develop this over time as you got older?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you, as pilots, we get asked that quite a bit. And I wish I could say it was a lifelong aspiration. It's something that I always thought I could do, but it's something that I never considered. I come from a really blue collar family, mostly military, all enlisted military, and then the men were truck drivers or what have you. So I never considered aviation. I wasn't a very good student in school. In fact, I barely graduated high school and just joined the military right away. So I just didn't think it was ever possible for me. I was in Air Force Junior ROTC, so I was always interested in military planes and anything related to the military. So, but I definitely didn't ever consider myself being a pilot and flying.
Well, with that Air Force ROTC program, you get some exposure to just aerospace education too, right?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of years of it. Yep.
Very cool. So you go into the military. What did you end up doing in the military?
I joined the Navy like my grandfather and my grandmother's brothers and all of my grandfather's brothers. And I ended up, I was called an operations specialist, and we did a bunch of different things on the ship. We sat in an air-conditioned room called Combat Information Center. And primarily, I operated the radars, the surface search radar, the air search radar, and using something called identification friend or foe, which is IFF, which we all use in general aviation. It's mode S nowadays, but it used to be mode C. So, anti-submarine warfare, anti-air warfare, all kind of nautical charts, navigation. So when I did learn to fly, I already had my phonetic alphabet down pat. I already knew the compass roads. I already knew how to, I loved reading aeronautical charts because they were cool and interesting. So yeah, I spent 8 years in the Navy, 4 years, 2 months and 9 days on a guided missile frigate. making a couple 6-month deployments over the Persian Gulf and the Med, and didn't really have any transferable job skills. So I re-enlisted and became an instructor, taught kids right out of boot camp what I did on the ship. And at the same point in time, I was going to college 5 nights a week, 4 hours a night.
Wow.
For about 2 years, 2 months, knocking out a computer information systems degree.
Okay.
And then in my free time, I was teaching myself practical computer skills because my college didn't provide a whole lot of practical skills aside from spreadsheets and databases and things like that. So then I got out after 8 years and embarked on a 22-year career in IT security. I was a professional hacker or penetration tester or ethical hacker, as the terms come, a white hat hacker. So people would hire me and eventually my company when I started my own business to emulate the bad guys, essentially red team their organization and answer the question, can we be hacked? And if so, what is the impact to our operations? So actually I ended up working for the National Weather Service and NOAA. So, which is really interesting because I went to the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City as part of my job. And I've been to many of the WFOs, the weather forecast offices that put out the TAFs and the area forecast discussion. So it was a tiny little glimpse into aviation.
So as you're doing that, almost like the Red Force part of it, are you learning about like the weather side of things too, or are you mostly just working on the infrastructure and the security of their systems?
Yeah, we would look at any organization, whether it would be a hospital, whether it would be a bank, and would say, we'd really answer their question like, what are the keys to the kingdom? If a bad guy got in, could they shut down their operations? Could they impact the mission? Obviously, the Aviation Weather Center, if a hacker could break in and let's just say lock all the meteorologists out of their computers and they wouldn't be able to issue these critical weather products that we all rely on, that would have a big impact.
So what were the things you found rewarding with that career?
It was every day, essentially, you have to study and learn about the new vulnerabilities that were published and research them and figure out how you can exploit those vulnerabilities to gain access. So it was, it's kind of a constant cat and mouse game with hackers. It's attack, defend. So that was really rewarding. Probably the most rewarding thing was I worked for Department of Energy a lot, which does a lot with which manages our nuclear weapons complex. And so I had a above top secret clearance, a Q clearance, if you will. I was cleared to view nuclear weapons design information. So I would go in and as somebody that, like I said, barely graduated high school and self-taught hacker, it was very rewarding to go in and hack systems that were set up and built by PhDs and, really smart, real scientists, real computer scientists.
You say that like you don't have all this experience behind you too.
Yeah, I guess I just wasn't formally educated very well. So, these guys are some of the best and brightest in the world, designing their own firewalls and intrusion detection systems before they were even commercialized, because obviously they're trying to protect our information from nation states. Foreign militaries.
Yeah. So I suppose though, it's like as soon as you figure out what the vulnerability is, I'm assuming you have to, part of your work is you show someone, here's the vulnerability, they fix it, and now you find a new way in. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that's really accurate. It's kind of akin to if you were going to do an assessment, is this building secure? Well, how many windows are there? How many doors are there? What other entry points? The air conditioning system, ducts, manholes or something. So yeah, it's like one door closes or you find a vulnerability in one window, somebody left the window unlocked, or it can be easily broken. Then they fix that and then you get in another way. You have to find the entry point the other way. And then once you're in, maybe you've broken into one window and you're in one room, then there's many other rooms in the facility that you need to gain access to.
Gotcha. So I suppose over 20 years of a career that there's a lot that's evolved in that space too, right?
Yeah, a lot has evolved. And actually, probably 3 or 4 years ago, AI came out and a penetration testing company, I guess it would be a competitor to mine, came out with AI penetration testing. And I was like, oh man, I was kind of nervous. And I thought that was going to take my job back then. And I let their test product loose in my vulnerable environment that I would have people that would want to work for me say, go hack this network that was definitely vulnerable. And it couldn't do anything. It was really, it was really weak. It couldn't break into anything. And I was like, okay, phew, my job is protected. Nowadays, it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the evolution and the speed of development in AI is, it's almost exponential.
Sure. I'd say that how fast that's advanced is almost kind of scary, but
it is scary in many ways.
we could probably do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about aviation. That's kind of why we're here. So tell me about your journey into aviation. It sounds like you probably got into this a little bit later. So were you working with your company at that point, or was this after that even?
Yeah, I'd actually sold my company. One of my best friends got embarked on his aviation journey probably 15 years ago. I was flying a lot for work as a consultant, flying to DC, flying all over the country. And, anybody that flies a lot commercially gets tired of it and eventually considers some alternatives. And my friend got his pilot's license and he was pretty young in I don't even know. I don't even want to think how many hours he had, but took me on a night flight over Tampa Bay and we went out for dinner and I thought, wow, that's really cool. Maybe I can do the same thing and then I can fly myself to work. But when I looked at the reality of it, of, getting myself to DC, say in March or February, and I have to be there Monday morning at 8:00, reliably, I kind of thought to myself, well, I'm going to need, a really capable aircraft. And to get to that level where you can fly a really capable aircraft that can go fast and high and handle ice and get you there more reliably than a 172, because obviously that wouldn't be a very fun trip.
No.
It's going to take a lot of time. And so I kind of put it on the back burner. I was like, I'm not really too interested in flying a plane from the 70s either. That kind of spooked me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Although now, obviously, it's less of a concern because now I know what goes into certifying and the maintenance and annuals and everything of airplanes. So I kind of put it on hold for a while, and then I sold my company, and I essentially, I retired, and I bought an airplane at that point. I bought a new, a 2022 Diamond DA40.
Okay.
NG. I like the diesel, the Jet A burning. Simple, modern avionics, really modern plane. So, and my wife and I spend about 6 months of the year in Cabo in Mexico, and we bounce around a lot. So I needed someone to take care of my plane, and I really couldn't. I was having too much fun at the beach, going fishing and surfing in Cabo to be like, okay, now's the time to learn to fly. So I put my plane on leaseback up in New York. And they took care of my plane, and it did fairly well for the first year while the plane was under warranty. It made some good money. And summer of 2024, I was riding my bicycle way too much. I was acting like a professional. My wife and I are into endurance mountain bike racing. We were at the time, and so we were riding our bikes like we were 20-year-old professional cyclists at the age of 50 or so. So I really wore out my knee, and I'm kind of a all in black or white person. So, that's why I was like riding my bike 6 days a week and training so hard.
Sure.
And I needed somewhere to put my energy. And I always knew that aviation would provide that intellectual stimulation that I needed, because you can go so broad and so deep in aviation. So I couldn't ride my bike anymore, and I was kind of going stir crazy. And so I started taking some lessons in Bentonville, Arkansas. That's where we were living for the summer. And I was flying these 172s, and every lesson was in a different plane, and it was hard to get the schedule worked out with either the instructor or the airplane, the common student pilot struggle.
Absolutely.
And I was like, well, I have this almost brand new plane in New York. And part of the deal was I could do all the flight training I wanted in my plane in New York, part of the deal. So I was like, well, I'm going to New York. So hopped on commercial, and I lived in a hotel for about 5 weeks and hired a rental car. And I just went to all I did was I showed up with my written and my medical, of course. And all I did was just fly my plane as much as possible. And I got to my check ride, my private pilot check ride, I think July 30th, I want to say 2024, not even 2 years ago, with about 133 hours. And not necessarily because I needed it, but once I got approved or endorsed for my solo, then I could just go to the airport anytime and grab my plane and do pattern work. They were comfortable with letting me do that. So I just flew it a bunch and became super comfortable with it. So then I hired somebody from a CFI because I was VFR only, and I wasn't even going to think about attempting to fly my plane back from New York to Arkansas by myself the day after I got my private pilots.
Smart decision.
Well, part of my, my entire professional career was in IT risk management. So I'm I'm not scared of taking risks. I just want to mitigate risks and smart as possible. I'm very risk aware, and I try to mitigate risk. So anyways, I hired him, and we had a great time. And we encountered some weather and some challenges and typical long cross country stuff. Got my plane back to Bentonville, and I was retired, and I had just gotten my private pilot's license, and I wanted to go explore and visit friends and family that I hadn't seen for a long time. So my wife and I just started hopping in the plane and going places, going to Nebraska to see her family, which is I think it was about 2.5, maybe 2 hours, 45, doing 140 knots.
Okay. That's not bad.
No, it's not bad. And it was burning 7 gallons an hour. So it was fantastic.
Nice.
And I love flying the Diamond. It was, that was back when Jet A was, I don't know if Jet A is cheaper than Avgas now, but it was 2 years ago. Anyhow, so really started using the plane a lot, and really quickly realized how I needed to get my instrument rating very quickly because, clouds.
Clouds.
You got clouds, plain and simple. We can't fly through them, and we don't want to fly through them.
Yeah.
I guess about 6 weeks later, I like accelerated training. I like immersion-based training. So I went to Mississippi and I did my instrument rating. Once again, I showed up with my written done, and I did 5 10-hour days with a really young instructor who was amazing. On the 6th day, I did my check ride and got my instrument rating, and then departed from that airport on an IFR flight plan, picked up my clearance in the air, all kinds of cool stuff, and flew back to Bentonville, and then continued flying around all over the place. My wife was a champ. We flew in the Diamond from Nebraska to Hot Springs, Arkansas, to Hilton Head, South Carolina, up to all the way up to Maine to visit my brother. So lots of time.
So let me ask you this question. So in New York, you're pretty committed to this is pretty much all you're doing because you don't have the distractions like you said. And now you go back home, and now you're back with family. You're doing some traveling. In your opinion, how did that affect the dynamics of your studies and things like that?
Luckily, my wife is really cool. She knows that if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And that's pretty much all I'm going to focus on. So I would just go into one bedroom and I would just go away and study and not really do anything else.
Well, it's good to have that support and that she understands and gives you that space to go and just chase after that,
Yeah, absolutely. I was able to do it quickly because I wasn't really constrained by time, which most people are constrained by time. And I wasn't really constrained by money because, well, I own my own plane and it was really cheap to operate. So without those constraints and then, kids or anything, it's just like, it's kind of like me now with work with PlaneWX. I can put in 16-hour days for a month or two straight, 7 days a week, no problems. It's kind of how I'm built, I guess.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your journey through aviation. So you're not in the Diamond anymore, correct?
It didn't take me too long to realize the limitations of the Diamond.
Okay.
And that was, like I said, I was doing 4.5 hour long flights in it. I was crossing large parts of the country, so large different weather systems and embarking on these big trips. And I realized a couple limitations. And one was, well, no de-icing equipment at all was a big time limitation in the winter. And I thought, well, this stinks. The freezing level is at, 4th hour or on the ground. So
Right.
what are we supposed to do? We're grounded.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized that speed was a big safety factor as well, because, well, if I can get there in half the time or 3/4 of the time, then it's less of a period of time that I have to predict the weather or less time for thunderstorms to develop in the afternoon. I can get home in the morning faster. So I landed on, and at the same time, a big airworthiness directive for the engine for the Diamond came out and effectively grounded the plane or forced all of us to get 50-hour inspections done. Because the Diamond had 100-hour service intervals with the diesel, which is really nice because I did fly a lot. Mm-hmm. So that meant I was traveling a couple hours to a Diamond service center every about 3 to 4 weeks because I would, fly a lot.
Yeah.
So it became really inconvenient. And I was like, well, time to upgrade, I guess. I was really happy with the Diamond. I was stoked going 140 to 150 knots at 8,000 feet. And, it was like, you can fly it as much as you want. So I got a 2024 SR22 Turbo, the G7, in late December of January 2025. And then I did my transition training and completely different aircraft because the Diamond did not have mixture. It didn't have the hot starting issues that most piston avgas powered aircraft have. So it was a bit of a learning curve and it went a lot faster and it has more complex systems. It was a great plane. And I put about 400-ish hours on the Diamond. And then I put maybe 450 hours on the Cirrus. And I just sold the Cirrus. I guess this month. And I transitioned to a TBM. So
that's a bit more high performance.
Yeah, it's a bit more high performance. And it really, we hear over and over again, it's the airplane you own it should fulfill your mission. And I said earlier that we spend winters in Cabo in Mexico. And I would fly myself there to Mexico over the Sierra Madre mountains which go up to 9,000 feet.
Okay.
And there's lots of convection in the summertime. And when you're flying in Mexico, there's no NEXRAD down there. And you don't talk to ATC at all if you're below 20,000 feet, even if you're on an IFR plan. And they really can't provide you any kind of, well, you're not talking to them. So there's no traffic separation. Not that that's a big concern, but weather information or really any help. So you're just kind of out there on your own. That had to cross an ocean, the Sea of Cortez or the Gulf of California, which is about 110 nautical miles across in a single engine piston. So, I did a lot of flights. I've probably flown in and out of Mexico about 30 times.
Okay.
And every time I did, I had a survival kit on board. I had a first aid kit. I had extra water. I had a raft. I had life jackets. I was as prepared, and I had a parachute.
Had all the things.
which made me feel better. but I was like, man, it was a challenge, and it was a little out of my comfort zone, to be honest. It was a little more risk than I wanted to accept, but it was really my only choice aside from leaving my plane in the US for 6 months and then going to Mexico. So I did it as safely as I could, but I was always looking at, my wife and I are flying at 17,500 and with cannulas in our nose, and we're not, talk to anybody for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then flying from Cabo to Nebraska, say you got to clear customs in West Texas somewhere.
Sure.
And that's 3 hours to there, and then another 4 hours to Nebraska. And that's a long time for storms to develop and the weather uncertainty, I guess. So the TBM really kind of meets that needs. It's pressurized. Now we can take our dog. My wife used to fly commercial a lot with the dogs, and I would fly myself down. So yeah, just went through my transition training earlier this month and spent 40 hours with an instructor.
Okay, very cool. So performance-wise, how quick can you take that trip now, or have you not done that trip yet? From Cabo back up.
Yeah, my instructor and I did it. We went and picked up wife and dog, and we left Scottsdale. That's where I did a lot of my training out of. And we were in Cabo in 2 hours, and then we flew straight to Nebraska. We flew to Wichita, Kansas, which is a pretty good 3.5 hour leg, clear, and then quick hop to Nebraska. So now I can make it down there in one leg because I don't have to stop and clear customs.
So let's transition a little bit and talk about PlaneWX. So how did you get into the space of, this is a thing that I want to look into, or like, how did the concept come up for you?
Yeah, it was pretty early on in my aviation career, my journey, that I would plan these trips. Like I mentioned, I flew a lot, 400 hours in a year in the Diamond, and 6 weeks of it as a VFR pilot. So, and then I went to be an IFR pilot, but I'd make all these plans, go visit family, go do this. You tell people you're coming, or you book hotels and you book rental cars, and you go to the beach and it's an Airbnb and it's non-refundable, and you got to be there or else you got to whip out your credit card. So I'd start to make these trips, and I'm a planner. And so, I'd open up ForeFlight and pull a weather briefing for a week in advance, and it would show me AirMets from today, PIREPs from today, SIGMETs from today, and not very much useful information at all, or really nothing aside from like a prog chart to kind of give me an idea of what it looked like in 7 days. So I poked around ForeFlight a lot, and I saw the under the TAF tab is the forecast discussion. And the forecast discussion is put out by the weather forecast offices, by the meteorologists. And it's really the target audience is really meteorologists. It's really not pilots, because it sure wasn't for this pilot, because I didn't understand 90% of the stuff. But I was like, man, this is pretty awesome. Like, they talk about pattern movements and fronts and weather conditions up to 7 days out. I got to learn how to read this. And then, I was going from Arkansas to Nebraska. And so I started reading this AFD, and it's issued 4 times a day. So try to understand it. And then I'll be like, oh, shoot. Well, I've also got to read the Wichita AFD, because that comes out and that's en route. And then I need to read the Omaha AFD. So now I have to read 3 times 4 is 12. I've got to read 12 of these AFDs a day, and then kind of understand it all would be step number 1. And then paint a big picture in my mind about what the weather is going to look like.
Yeah.
And if I was going to be able to fly. So I took a serious 3-year break from tech after I sold my company, because I was in tech for 20 plus years, and I was kind of tired of every day having to read about it and learn the new happenings.
Yep.
So
it's not a changing industry at all. You don't have to read up on it.
Yeah, I know. It's even worse now. So I was AI curious. So I took the AFDs and I just said, here's some, some weather information. I want to fly my Cirrus or my Diamond from Bentonville, Arkansas to Fremont, Nebraska on Sunday, and it was Monday. It's like, what do you think? Am I going to be able to make the trip? That's all I was asking. And it provided me with some pretty good insight because, it's not a meteorologist, but it understands a lot of things, and it can really break things down into layman's terms if you ask it the right way. So light bulb moment kind of went off in my head then. And I wasn't ready to embark on a new business because once I get into something, I go at it hard until it fails or, I win. So I was like, no, I'm not ready to start another business. So I kind of shelved the idea for a while, but the problem kept coming up as, the problem of longer term weather forecasts and then constantly having to stress and ask, my wife would be, we're going to Thanksgiving in Nebraska. And, she'd be like, and I told her this very early on when I got the plane, I was like, it's very serious. We're going to fly if the weather permits. And if we don't, we're going to make alternate plans. I'm not going to get stuck in this position of having to fly in marginal weather conditions that I'm not capable of or comfortable with because we have to be somewhere. It's one of the biggest threats.
Absolutely it is. So
Thanksgiving comes and wife, of course, says, so do you think we're going to be able to fly? And I'm like, I don't know, honey. I'll tell you the night before when the TAF comes out.
Right.
And then we all know that sometimes the night before is not even soon enough. Sometimes we don't know if we're going until the morning of. We've got to wake up and see what the ceilings look like and see what the radar picture looks like en route. So I got kind of frustrated with this and I'm like, I'm just going to do what I always did and hire a programmer because I'm a technology guy and I built platforms and software, but always by hiring other programmers to do it because I am not a developer and that's a very unique skill set. So I hired a developer. So I dictated all my requirements of this app of what it would do. And I hired him. And about the same time, I got an email saying, build your own app with AI, quick start guide. And I was like, okay, it was kind of an unsolicited, spam, kind of a spam email. And I was like, okay, I'm curious enough. And so I use this online code development, AI-based code development site. And I just pasted in my requirements or my specifications document that I had drafted up for the developer, the human, and very quickly produced me something that I was really impressed with. And that would take a human a long time to do. And so I just started working at it all day, every day for the whole time my developer was working on it. And by the end of 10 days or so, I had decided that, I had made much further progress than he had made. And then I didn't have to have meetings and go back and forth. There's a lot of efficiencies with AI-based code development as well, because you don't have to wait till somebody's available, be dependent on their work hours and how many hours a day, because I can work 16 hours a day and I couldn't ask that of another human to do that for me. So the problem was pretty well defined. I really didn't have long-term weather forecasting or information. And I thought I could come up with a solution to do that. And I wanted to quantify the risk, not just, and that's the thing with weather information. There's a plethora of all kinds of weather information. Open up ForeFlight. You can get everything. Go to aviationweather.gov. Tons of stuff. You just have to constantly, and it's just raw data, and it's up to us, the pilot. And many of us aren't professional pilots. It's not our full-time job. It's, a side hobby or something. So we're definitely not meteorologists. Most of us aren't. And it's difficult to understand some of it. Most pilots have they're really good in PPL training to have a really good foundational understanding of weather and everything. But then you just have to keep on top of it. So if you're planning a trip, a week out, you've got to constantly check in and kind of stress about your trip. And I wanted to alleviate that stress. And I wanted to mix in. So I wanted to score. I wanted to create a weather briefing that was scored, that was quantified, that also included your personal minimums.
Okay.
And I wanted really granular personal minimums. I wanted, many personal minimums worksheets and everything. They just have, one ceiling and one visibility. And I learned, through IFR, like you can have a separate departure minimum. The departure ceiling minimum and approach minimums can be different. And I wanted things to be really granular. And then I wanted to measure the aircraft capability. Is it FICI certified? How long do you want to stay? What's your icing tolerance? How long do you want to stay? Will you fly at all in moderate icing? What's your turbulence tolerance? How long do you want to stay in the clouds for? So I wanted to really personalize. I worked 7 days a week for I was doing 2 8-hour shifts.
Okay.
I'm a hardcore guy. I wake up at like 4 o'clock, sometimes 3 o'clock, and I put in a good 10, 12 hours. And then I go lay in the sun for a couple hours and pass out. And then I do another 10 hours. So I worked for probably 2 months like this. And at one point, my wife said, she reminded me that I hadn't left the condo in 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
I literally hadn't left the condo complex in 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Apparently I'm really obsessive. So, I was like, okay, we'll go fishing or something. Well, and it was great. But, I started working on it late last year before Thanksgiving, actually. That really is honestly the impetus for all this, the Thanksgiving challenge. How do you get, you would face the same weather where you live if you were flying somewhere else. Yeah, exactly. So worked. And, I ended up, posting on the Cirrus owners, the COPA forum and a couple other places. I was looking for beta testers. And cause, I'm not, especially then I wasn't the most experienced pilot and I'm still not the most experienced pilot. So I needed others to help me, build this product and provide feedback and to make it really good. And so I think I had about 100 beta testers. That was pretty easy getting beta testers, and then just kept developing, refining the process, tweaking scoring. It's a really big challenge to try to actually develop a score of a weather briefing, because we all have different tolerance acceptances.
Right.
One friend of mine won't even fly through the corner of a convective SIGMET, even though the radar says there's nothing anywhere close to him.
Yeah.
So we all have different experiences.
Well, and based on the things you've talked, like there's a lot of different parameters, it sounds like you can enter for those personal minimums. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, a ton of different parameters. So it's a really difficult challenge. And at times, because most often people would give me some feedback in the early days, say the score's too low because, well, you said your personal minimum was 1,000 feet for an IFR arrival, and you're getting a 0% score because the TAF 2 hours before your flight says the ceiling's at 800 feet. So what do you want me to do?
Yeah, right.
Your personal minimums are not supposed to be flexible, and sorry, but this is a harsh reality. It's not that pilots don't like to be told no. It's the limitation is the weather briefing is really static. It's predicated on a very specific departure time, 8 a.m., and then a very specific route. And then the altitude that you file at, right? Those are the three main parameters. So the weather briefing is very static, where flying is very dynamic, right? If the ceiling is 800, and even if I stick to my personal mins and wait for it to get to 1,000 feet, well, no big deal. I'm just going to wait till the ceiling lifts, right? And then I'm going to take off. Or if there's a pop-up thunderstorm, not a huge deal. I'll just go around it. And if there's clouds where icing may be present, well, I'll go below them or I'll go above them. So that's one of the limitations of a static weather briefing that I have to solve.
And is that something you're still working on, trying to work through that dynamic, or have you solved that?
No, I'm working on it. Especially for a longer term. We'll score a weather briefing 2 weeks out based on model data. We use the ECMWF and the GFS in the US, and we use some other models for European users. So we'll develop a weather briefing 2 weeks out, and the scoring doesn't get 2 weeks out is kind of just major patterns, right? So
yeah, right.
It's never going to tell you 0% 2 weeks out because it's way too uncertain. There's too much uncertainty. But I
feel like 2 weeks is, you can have a very rough idea of what we're looking at.
You can have a rough idea, and you can look at historical weather patterns and things like that. But for the most part, if you put a weather briefing into, sometimes I remember an Arctic cold front was coming down from Canada, and it was calling it to be over Arkansas in 9 days, and it was pretty darn accurate.
Okay. So we've talked about a lot of different parameters that go into this and some of the scoring. So for someone who's maybe debating looking at something like this for their own, decision making, how does this all come together and how does it work? Like, how does the scoring come together and the parameters for like a new user?
Yeah. So basically, the core product is the weather briefing. The weather briefing that gives you a score based on where you're going, how you're getting there, your route, your altitude. And then it gives you all the gory details about icing and turbulence. And we include a lot of visual imagery now, so prog charts, and we do a lot of other visual incorporations, the TCF, and we integrate the GTG, the graphical turbulence guide, and the GTGN, which is what they call a nowcast product, and the icing forecast, the IFI, and the CIP for icing. So we basically just grab all the relevant weather products, score them against your personal mins and aircraft capabilities, and present you this score. So the weather briefing is really the core product. And we have a completely free plan. You don't have to pay for PlaneWX. And you can go on and generate X number of weather briefings per month for free. Now, so the weather briefing is the core product. The other two major components of PlaneWX, I call PlaneWX a decision support system. It's not going to tell you not to fly. We're not going to make the go, no-go decision for you. And when I see a 0% score for my own briefings, which I do because I fly a lot, it's not mission impossible. It just tells me it's probably going to be a very high workload flight, or it might be mission impossible because there's just going to be thunderstorms sitting, at my departure airport or en route or at my destination. Sometimes we just can't fly, right? Doesn't matter what kind of a plane we have.
Yep.
Unless it's a turbojet that can really get up and fast, really high. So the weather briefing is a big thing. So that's one part of the decision, one input to the decision. And then I've got an integrated FAA PAVE. We use a PAVE framework for the risk assessment, the self-assessment, which integrates the weather briefing. So that would be the environmental factors. And then thirdly, we've all probably done this. We've all probably embarked on a flight, pulled a weather briefing, and then we're really unsure of if we should take that flight because we had questions. And so we'd phone a friend, and you'd hope that your friend would be awake at 6 a.m. and he'd be able to jump to his flight, put in your origin, your destination, your altitude, your route, pull the weather briefing, and give you some advice. So to solve that problem, I built the Mentor Network, which is essentially a mentor matching system where you get a weather briefing, you have questions, you're uncertain. Maybe you've never flown over the Rockies before, or maybe you haven't flown much in Florida before, much around thunderstorms, and you really want to talk to somebody to help you as another input to the go, no-go decision. So the Mentor Network is really cool. On every weather briefing, there's a little button, mentor, and you can click it, and you can click a button called Need Help Now. And Need Help Now, and the mentors are all volunteers. They're experienced pilots, and they've set their workout or their available hours. So you click Need Help Now, and a text message gets blasted out to in waves to a bunch of different pilots, and you get it. Me as a mentor, I watched this happen in real life. A VFR only pilot in California was flying to Sedona, and it was 7 a.m. I got a text on my phone that says somebody wants to talk to, gives you their name. They want to talk to you about their flight to Sedona, and click on the weather briefing. So I opened up his weather briefing and I read his concerns, and I saw the results of his PAVE risk assessment. And I was like, I'm going to wait to see if somebody else accepts the mentor request, because I don't want to mentor everybody. I'm not the best. And within a minute or so, somebody else connected with them. There's a way for the system exchanges phone numbers and tells you who should call who. And they had their phone call, and next thing you know, I was tracking him on FlightAware, and he was on his way.
Wow. I didn't know that was part of it. So I knew about like some of the decision support things, but I didn't realize the mentor program was part of this as well.
Yeah, and it's all available to free users as well. I won't make anybody pay for any of the safety related functions. So free users get the same high quality weather briefing. We don't put anything behind a paywall, and they get access to the PAVE risk assessment, and they get access to the mentor network.
Very cool. I want to go back to the PAVE portion of it just real quick. I mean, we're talking an awful lot about the environment portion, but what parameters have you built in for the other parts, for like the pilot, the aircraft, things like that?
It's straight out of the PHAC.
Okay.
It's everything straight out of the PHAC. So based on it's based on all these acronyms that we learn.
Right.
I'm safe, care, team, how do you transfer risk? And there's like, if you have a low score and you choose go, but maybe you're fatigued or you're in an emotional state or stressed, it's going to ask you, how do you plan? Because risk can be mitigated, right? If you take a second pilot, or if you delay, or you postpone, or whatnot. So it walks you through. I didn't make any of this up. It's straight from the PHAC.
Is any of that customizable? Say, for example, I have a specific thing that I want to include for like my own, a stressor for a pilot, for example.
It's not, but it really should be. I want to incorporate risk stacking, nighttime, IMC, terrain, things like that. Your third flight of the day. So I do want to do some more customizations of the self-assessment, and I really need to rename it. I really need to rename it what corporate flight departments name it, and that would be a flight risk assessment tool, a FRAT. And, it can be based on the PAVE framework, but then we can make it really customizable and do risk stacking and some analysis of, hey, you said you had a 3 strikes and you won't fly rule, but you're choosing to fly at nighttime. You're choosing to fly in IMC and in the mountains. So
like the Swiss cheese model of looking at the risk. I just don't know that the FAA has anything specific in the PHAC that says this is a thing. I mean, it's probably a good rule of thumb for especially the more inexperienced pilots, but maybe even experienced pilots at that, because we get complacent,
Yeah, exactly. And that's why through my training, they learn, write down your minimums aren't flexible based on the weather, right?
Right.
They shouldn't be flexible. So when I was first implementing this, I was like, I want to lock people out, stop them from changing their minimums. And I was like, no, I won't do that. Everybody is, we're all grown-ups here.
Yeah. Well, I guess in that space too, say that I have a certain wind personal minimum, but if I go up and I practice with a CFI and I start to get more and more comfortable, I could see a space where I might want to adjust that over time.
Of course. And I just raised my personal minimums because I'm in a new aircraft now. I just raised my arrival ceiling and my departure ceiling because I don't have a parachute anymore.
Sure, yeah.
One of those serious pilots who was like, oh yeah, as long as I can see the end of the runway, I'll depart in not 0, but I'll depart in a 100-foot ceiling because, well, if I have any problems, well, I'll just pull my parachute. One of those guys.
It's a nice safety tool. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah, It
That
is.
can't be the end all be all of your safety plan.
Yeah, totally.
So as you've worked with beta testers and now with users, what kind of feedback are you getting and are you using that to adjust the program and the platform?
Yeah. It's one of the coolest things ever. And it's so rewarding to be connected with so many smart pilots. And we have now over 1,300 pilots that fly such a wide variety of aircraft, from Vision jets to Citations. One guy flies a Global 7500, the really big heavy duty jets. And then we've got a bunch of turboprops and 100 plus Vision jets, and then a bunch of Cirrus, and then a bunch of twin engine pistons and PC-12s and everything. So, and part of the onboarding is people enter, their aviation experiences and their ratings. And we have well over 100 ATP rated pilots, and we have pilots with 20,000 hours and 10,000 hours. And really, this is who I want to connect with, these really experienced people that I can learn from. So yeah, I soaked it up and I do every day. And if you send a feedback in or a bug report in, it's likely going to be fixed within hours. I'm about to release a fuel advisor. So it will obviously know your route, and maybe it could be a really long route that's outside of your aircraft range. And you can put in all your preferences, like the old 4-flight trip planner. They retired it. So my fuel advisor, you can put in avoid class Bravo airports. You don't want, if you're flying a 172 or a Cirrus, you are not going to land at DFW to get fuel. So that should not be a recommendation. Or maybe some turbine drivers like Class Charlies. A lot of light jets and stuff, they just like Class Charlies because they have services, they have GPUs, all that kind of thing. So you can put in your preferences there. Avoid, I personally hate vector landing fees. So I have a database of all airports in the US that have landing fees. So you can click avoid landing fees.
Yeah.
Avoid high density training airports. So that's an option. And then big thing for Jet A burning people is fuel programs. So I have all the different fuel programs in there.
Okay.
Like 10 of them. So it'll build you, and it's not just a fuel, it doesn't just tell you where to get fuel. It's a weather-aware fuel stop planner.
Okay. Interesting. So
constantly
incorporates that weather data then too.
Yeah. What good is a fuel recommendation if there's going to be bad weather?
Right. Right.
And we can do that for you.
Very cool. So the other question I have for you is, have you interacted with many CFIs that are like integrating this into their training or how their students are getting briefings?
Yeah, I have. A Part 141 flight school reached out to me.
Okay.
And they said, we have 20 to 30 cross-country flights a week. And they really wanted to make sure their students pulled the weather, and they wanted to set some parameters on where students could fly. They wanted to be able to save routes, approved airfields. They want to have maybe not personal minimums. Personal minimums would be enforced, but maybe school minimums as well, because the schools usually have max crosswind limitations that they won't allow, or no grass runways. So I'm building those enterprise features. They're half built. So the goal would be to provide an enterprise service for flight departments, corporate flight departments, or 135 charter companies, to provide a top-down view. So the chief instructor at a flight school would be able to log into the portal every day, and he would be able to see weather scores and whether or not they did their pave risk assessment, whether or not maybe the school would require mentoring for scores below 50%.
Okay.
So they would start to train their students to ask a friend. I know you know everything because you're 20 years old and you're a man, so you're fearless. So you think nothing bad will ever happen to you.
Right.
But school policy says that if you don't have a weather score, if your weather briefing doesn't contain a pave risk assessment showing us that you've done some self-reflection, self-assessment, and you haven't haven't talked to a mentor, then you're not going to fly. So yeah, we have quite a few CFIs on the platform, but no enterprise product yet.
Okay, very cool. So what do you see next for the platform? And we've talked a bunch of possible next as we've been moving along here, but is there any specific long-term goals you have with it as well?
My whole goal is to have a measurable impact on aviation safety. Like I said, I listen to those AOPA podcasts and I watch so many accident videos, just trying to learn as much as I can. And I felt that weight of responsibility the first time I took my wife on a 4-hour trip to Florida from Arkansas in the summertime to go to a beach vacation. I couldn't believe the overwhelming amount of the sheer weight of responsibility. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like her life is literally in my hands and it's all about my decision making.
Right.
And man, I love her family. And if I might die in a plane crash, but I'm certainly going to do everything I possibly can and be as smart as I can and mitigate risks as much as possible. So that if that does happen, nobody will ever be able to say Mark was reckless, or, my kids won't be able to say you were reckless, or her family, so, so it's anything I can do to deliver a more accurate weather briefing to help pilots make the go, no-go decision, I'll do.
Awesome. So Mark, we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that I've missed that you might want to bring up, or I might need to cover? Or?
Well, I mentioned that the platform is free. We also have a couple different paid services. Actually, I just introduced a new service tier this week because I had an 85-year-old pilot in Oregon who said, I only fly 2 or 3 times a month cross countries, and I would pay, $5 or $6 a month, but $14.99 a month when you pay it monthly is a little too much. And I was like, most pilots do only fly 2 or 3 cross countries a month where they really need to do some serious weather planning. So I spent a few days and I just rolled out the casual plan. And I think it can be as low as $5 a month if you pay for the year in advance, which is less than the gallon of avgas. So for something that we all need to do. So anyway, will automatically refresh your weather briefings as the new weather products come out.
Okay.
Rescore it and email you updates.
Okay.
So every morning, if you opt in, we send you a daily, a good morning email. It tells you what your METAR is, your TAF is, and here's the scores on all of your upcoming trips. So it prevents you from having to worry about manually checking the weather or say, oh, has TAF come out yet on my phone? Nope, TAF hadn't come out. Okay, I'll put it back down and come back in 30 minutes. So we've got the casual plan that's pretty cheap that implements almost everything that the pro plan does. You just can't monitor as many trips.
Okay.
There's a bunch of other features, but no, I mean, I love every day. I love interacting with the user base. If you send me a bug report or feedback, I will answer it and we'll have a discussion. I met a bunch of people in person, and I'm just having the time of my life building this product that I really do think has a big impact. One quick story I'll tell you. I got a feedback email because about 6 hours after every briefing, users will get an email and says, and we'll ask for feedback on the briefing. Did we miss anything? What was the quality of the briefing? What suggestions do you have? And this one guy says, I pulled up his feedback and it said 0%. And his comment was, I should have listened. I should have listened. I should not have flown. I barely made it home. And I was like, oh man, that just like hit me. And I was just like, wow, it is, flying is this serious. It's that serious. Like you might barely make it home. And that's why we all need to stay really humble, and we need to hold ourselves to a high standard, and continually try to evolve.
Well, if people are looking for you, where can they find you?
PlaneWX.ai. That is our primary website. .com works as well. I'll say quickly about AI because a lot of people have fears about AI. We don't actually I bought the AI domain name because AI was kind of hot when I was first building this, but I've learned a lot. I would never rely on AI for a lot of decisions, and I would question everything because we all know by now that it'll pump you up. It'll tell you you're the best pilot in the world and you can go and handle this weather or what have you. We really don't use AI for that much. Just really, we source all of the weather products from official sources. We filter it. We provide a very small data set of only relevant products to the AI and basically just ask it to write the narrative portion, to synthesize it, because that's what it's really good at. It's really good at taking 4 or 5 different models and TAF and METARs and all the TAFs along the way and painting a big picture. So PlaneWX.ai is where we are, and .com. And we're on the socials too. My wife does all the socials.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And we'll be at Oshkosh this year. We don't have a booth, but we'll be around, and look forward to meeting as many people as possible.
I'm going to hunt you down and find you then. Well, during my AirVenture adventures.
You should. I don't know, but we have all kinds of merch at shop. It's so silly. We're such a startup. There's not even a link to it from the website, but shop.PlaneWX. Not yet. There will be tonight. And you can, buy a t-shirt with your plane on it and a hat with your plane on it and stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, big thanks to Mark for joining me on this episode of the podcast. It's been really cool learning about PlaneWX. I've had the opportunity now to go in and play around with that program a little bit. I planned a trip a couple weeks out, and I've been getting daily emails that give me updates on the changes in the forecast. And obviously that I planned out like 2 weeks out. So during that time frame, you're going to see changes in that. But it's been really cool to compare that with my personal minimums that I was able to load in there, and with the changes in the forecast. That score changes. I can see why it changed. It's a pretty cool product. So if you're interested in checking that out, it's PlaneWX.ai, and it's a really cool product. So he also, if you're looking at the subscription side, and if you're interested in checking this program out from now until July 31st, he's given us a promo code of Flying Midwest that you can get 10% off on the subscription of PlaneWX. He also has the shop side where he's got t-shirts and hats of various different types of aircraft. That site is shop.planewx.ai, and the same promo code will work for 10% off any merchandise within his store. So super cool opportunity. I'm really appreciative that he was able to sit down with me, talk about his cool aviation journey and how he came up with this whole concept in the first place. It's really interesting how he saw a problem for himself and he was able to make something out of it, turn it into like a passion project, and really create something that is a benefit for the aviation community. So all kinds of stories like that out there. I love to be able to share them with you. Speaking of that, very intentional segue, by the way. If you or someone you know has an interesting story, interesting product, a bit of aviation history that you want to share, I'm still looking for more guests. So if you are interested, email me at jim@flyingmidwest.com, and I'd be happy to entertain getting you on a future episode. So look forward to hearing from people. And if you enjoy what I'm doing here, make sure that you like and subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss a single episode. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of AeroExploration. Thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next time.